Alicia, thank you so much for giving us some time this morning.
Absolutely.
So running for the 109th Assembly District here against incumbent Pat Fahey. So for viewers of ours that may not be familiar with your campaign, let's start off with what it's all about.
Okay, so my campaign for the 109th Assembly District is based on accurate representation of the people in the Assembly District. That's really where it begins and ends. I've had a lot of grave concerns as a constituent, a taxpayer, a regular person who lives in the city of Albany. A lot of concerns that I am not being accurately represented. And after running for mayor of Albany last year in 2021, I began to realize I'm not alone here. Somebody had to step up. And you know, I had a lot of momentum in my campaign for mayor, and I decided the time was right to let people know that there's finally a choice on the ballot. It's a viable choice, and we're ready to make some real changes in our district.
So the way I've been going about this here, I've been consulting Sienna's last poll from September. Now they just had one they released on Tuesday, which we can get to towards the end here. But the last big poll in September, most important issues for likely voters were polled here across New York State as we head into November. And the top three in this order were economic issues, threats to democracy, and crime. So why don't we start right at number one, because given with the rising inflation, it doesn't seem to be coming down anytime soon. And it is a global problem. We are not alone.
Absolutely.
When it comes to the state of New York, what needs to be done differently? What do you think needs to be happening at the state level that maybe isn't happening right now?
We need an immediate reshuffling of the order of priority in the state of New York. Everybody in New York is suffering and struggling on some level, whether it's our heat bill, our grocery bill, our tax bill. We're all struggling, and there are reasons for that. Some of them are very complex, but some of them are more immediately fixable. It begins with a reshuffling of priorities. So let me just give you an example here. So I've got a couple of bills sponsored by my opponent, Pat Fahey, in just the past couple of years. $100 million, Bill A 10537, Pat Fahey put forth to convert schools into community schools. What that has to do with is challenge schools, bringing in a number of additional resources that taxpayers have to bear the burden of, but have no say over in what they want to see. And that happened to me right here in the city of Albany. I live in Albany. My daughter was going to attend Myers Middle School, and now was sent to the North Albany Community School. It's actually a way to continue to encroach upon parents and remove some of their parental rights by bringing in outside services to continue to parent and control children. Looking at it, let's talk about finances. 2020 A02928A, a bill Pat Fahey supported for the taxation of short-term rental units. Anybody renting who has a property they'd like to rent, if it's anybody they're renting to that's less than 2 years, immediate taxation. They have to provide long-term reportings. They can only list one unit at a time. I mean, the minutia. She's regulating the sale of maraschino cherries in bars. We need a reshuffling of our priorities. We've got to prioritize right up front, allowing people to make decisions for themselves. First of all, greater accountability and transparency in how our money is being spent. And once that begins to happen, people are going to have a voice that is probably contrary to the way things are drifting. So that right off the top, we need to address aid for people who are having heating problems in their homes. Millions of dollars being spent in making sure that state vehicles are zero emissions. Meanwhile, we have a crime problem in the state of New York. People being shoved into the subway, people being raped, and their attacker gets out in 5 minutes on cashless bail. These are not problems that are unknown to the common populace here, especially in our region and in the state. However, they're not the priority for the people making the decisions. They're completely out of touch. So total reshuffling of priorities up front, really prioritizing the safety and well-being of the human beings in the state of New York.
And to stick with the economic issues just for a second, one of the concrete steps the state and a lot of county governments took as of late when it comes to gas prices by eliminating either a large portion of the county tax or a portion of the state tax has provided some relief, albeit in a temporary way. Is that something that you agreed with?
Well, I will say, I think every little bit helps, certainly. But I'm also going to say two things: too little, too late. First of all, we're already suffering, and this should have been done a long time ago. And cutting the taxes isn't going to help in the long term. People like Pat Fahey are still pushing through these green cars, zero emissions, meanwhile ignoring the mining of the lithium of the earth to power these green cars. We need to open up pipelines. We need to get the gas flow and become economically self-sufficient. And this is something that Pat Fahey has stood against. And now here we are looking like heroes because we're cutting taxes a little bit here and there, when we actually have ways to create greater self-sufficiency in the state of New York. But Pat Fahey and others like her are actively voting against these things. And what happens is when you reduce taxation after raising taxation, really what you are is a queen. And we don't want that in New York. We want representatives, not kings and queens. We got rid of those several hundred years ago, and we don't want them back.
Number 2 on that list, likely New York voters polled at 34%, was threats to democracy. We all know what the country has gone through over the past couple of years. What do you have to say to voters in the 109th district, voters across the state of New York, that their vote counts and that their vote will be kept safe?
So the first thing I'm going to say about democracy is, what is democracy? Who says what democracy is? We have to define the terms, because what one person might say is a democracy, another person would not agree is a democracy. The United States of America is a constitutional republic. We need to remember that. The biggest threat to democracy, if we say we agree to terms of what democracy is, the biggest threat to any civilization, including the state of New York and the great residents here, is the stifling of the voice of dissent. The United States of America was founded on dissent, and we defended dissent with our lives and the right for someone to disagree with us. And what's happened in New York is it's really become a perspective think tank, a worldview think tank. And that is the greatest threat to democracy. You want to have tough conversations. And I will say, several years ago, I visited the office of Pat Fahey because I was with a group who wanted to dissent about vaccinations. My children are vaccinated, but I didn't want to be forced or compelled to vaccinate them. I wanted to make the decision for myself. I visited her office. We had an appointment and she didn't even show up. And I was incredibly offended as a taxpayer for that, because I already know her stance on vaccinations. In fact, she had a bill, A03192, that any child, she sponsored this bill, any child 14 or above could consent to their own vaccinations without parental consent. That really raised my irk, and people that are parents in this district need to be aware that the removal of their parental authority is a problem. And when I showed up to share my voice, to voice my dissent to my representative, she couldn't even be bothered to come. We had to sit there with an office assistant. We waited for a very long time, and she never showed up. And so we have to have accurate representation, representatives who are willing to have difficult conversations, be the bridge between both sides and say, look, I represent not only the Democrats, I represent the Republicans, the Independents, the Libertarians, the Working Party, the Green Party. I represent all of you. Your opinions are valid and worthy, and there's got to be a greater coming together. That's really the biggest threat to our democracy. And if people are truly afraid of the threat to democracy, what you want to have is a representative who can have difficult conversations and will continue to show up and be there for that and find a way to make peace.
Moving on, and you've touched on it already a little bit, and that is crime at 29%. It was the third most popular item for folks who will be voting here in New York State come November. It's been a big issue, especially for those on the GOP platform here in New York State, and bail reform. A lot of folks have been outspoken about that, saying it needs to be repealed entirely rather than just possibly amended or reformed. So what do you have to say? Total
overhaul, hard stop. It was flawed from the beginning. It's a flawed foundation. Those cracks have become crevices now. And even the very people who originally were quasi-supportive of it are now seeing it, and people are being affected in deep ways. We are riddled with crime. In the city of Albany alone, per capita, we're on par with the city of Chicago per capita. And that's a big deal. We're actually a small city. And the first thing we have to do in addressing crime, in my opinion, it's a two-prong approach. The first thing we have to do is stop attacking the Second Amendment in specifically our district. So we've got Guilderland, New Scotland, lots of small, Voorheesville, lots of areas where people carry sidearms. And in the city of Albany, it's notoriously near impossible to get a pistol license, which is, I'm in the process of that myself right now. Meanwhile, our crime is on par per capita with the city of Chicago. There's a disconnect here. The Second Amendment ensures that we have the right to for the government not to infringe on us bearing arms to stand in defense of our lives. And we have the right to life. We have the right to not be murdered. And so there's that component of it has to be addressed. Pat Fahey, diehard, anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment, ergo anti-constitutionalist. That's a problem for any true American. In terms of crime, just in the city of Albany alone, when I was running for mayor, I can't tell you how many police left the force because Mayor Kathy Sheehan refused to back them up when there were difficult challenges with people who were causing trouble. Acting like guns are the problem, when really you could be murdered with a stick or you could be shoved onto the subway. You don't even need a gun to do that. So we've got to address holding people accountable for their crimes. Cashless bail, what a nightmare. I understand it disproportionately can affect people of low income. I accept that. And I think those statistics are real and should be addressed. However, we've got to just scrap the whole thing and start over. This was a train wreck from the beginning. And now we're seeing the effects of it. People are literally dying because of the support of garbage legislation like this.
And the latest poll, which just came out this past Tuesday, the first question posed to voters, is New York on the right track or is it headed in the wrong direction? 52 to 39 feel that it is headed in the wrong direction. So aside from everything that you've discussed so far, what else needs to be done? Should you win election in the 109th district? What are you doing on day one?
So 52 to 39, if you read into that number a little bit, you're going to find that New York State, being a largely Democrat state, 52 to 39, that's a lot of Democrats who think that the state is headed in the wrong direction in a state that's run by Democrats. I'm actually not a diehard team player in that I think the Republicans have every single thing done right and righteously. We are all nuanced human beings, and I don't like to draw hard lines between people and their thoughts. We're just too nuanced as human beings. Day one, this is how I imagine day one in a perfect world going. I would love to put out an announcement out there to hold a massive town hall, and I'll just sit there and take it. That's really what I see, and I really think a representative needs to do that. We need to have a record of people's grievance and complaints. We need to have the theater of civil discourse amongst us. I would like to be more in touch and more aware. I don't want to sit in a castle. I'm not a queen. Like I said, we dumped the kings and the queens hundreds of years ago. I'm a representative. And what I want to do is hear what are the issues. And if you just even look at social media, where people kind of feel like they can speak without restraint on social media, if you really look at social media, even just that, you will see people have a litany of concerns. Some of them I never even thought about. How can I accurately represent you if in my worldview or my perspective and experience, I didn't cross paths with that issue? It is really, so I'm a journalist. That's my background. I have my master's degree in journalism. And one of the things that's important to me is the story of the individual. That is actually a fundamental principle of how I run my life. I want to hear the stories of people. And so day one in my perfect world, the way I envision it is to have, to set up that time and place to sit and hear, and however long that takes, maybe we have a series of them, whatever that is, and start to approach a more accurate and even-handed representation of the people of the 109th district. It's simply not happening. All you have to do is go over to the New York State Assembly, drop down Pat Fahey's name, read through the things she's doing. She's saving the turtles. She's making sure that the emissions are zero in the cars. She's taking the rights away from parents. I mean, these are grave concerns, and they actually don't represent the common person in the city of Albany, in Guilderland, in New Scotland, in Voorheesville, in Altamont. But people feel very helpless. So you know what you can do? You can vote differently. This is not an ideology you're voting for. You're really voting for a change that needs to happen.
Well, as we wrap things up here, let's go back to that idea about getting those individual stories from people. As you've been going around the district and you've been campaigning, what are people's story? What are they sharing with you? And what is the biggest concern that you have heard throughout this campaign so far?
Definitely crime. Right off the top, everybody sees, hears, and is talking about the shocking crimes, especially coming out of New York City, which has turned into a dumpster fire for the state of New York. Everybody upstate is embarrassed, like this, I don't want to go into the city. I used to love going there. They don't even want to come into Albany anymore and do their shopping. I mean, our economy in Albany is suffering. Our streets look like ghost towns, other than the fact that they're a shooting gallery. Nobody wants to come here and do anything. And people are grieving the loss of Albany, if that makes sense. They look back with a nostalgia, especially if you're born and raised here like I am. Pat Fahey's actually from Chicago. I'm from here, from the capital region, and people grieve the loss of Albany because of the crime. They see it as a disgusting, filthy. This is the capital of the state of New York, and people are they cannot get off the topic of crime. So that's the number one thing I'm hearing. And I would say the second thing that I encounter the most is a lot of taxation issues, high cost of living here in the state of New York. Right here in the capital region, we're the fifth highest taxed sections of the capital region. And people are feeling that. People are making a mass exodus out of this area. That's no secret. Out of the state of New York. That's no secret. People are pulling their children out of public schools and they're homeschooling them. They're putting them in the charter schools in greater numbers than ever because they don't want the encroachment. Yesterday, the CDC now has voted to add the COVID inoculation into the schedule for children's vaccinations. Pat Fahey's going to vote for that. Kathy Hochul's going to push for that. And people are becoming afraid, disenfranchised, and they're becoming now enraged and ready to mobilize against it. So I really think we're going to have quite a surprise here in the state of New York. I think people who didn't like Lee Zeldin, for example, because of his affiliation with Donald Trump, that's a whole hot topic there. I think what they're beginning to realize now is that he's not so much he's not the level of threat that Kathy Hochul has proven herself to be. And they're a lot more willing to say, you know what, at the end of the day, I'm not even voting for an ideology here. That's on such a different level. And there's so much that Lee Zeldin, for example, couldn't even control, or that I, with my one vote in the assembly, I can't overturn abortion. With my one vote, I could vote against abortion, but I'm not going to be the one that overturns abortion. And so people are realizing when you start to look away from the headlines and really begin to think, and you start to look into what are these people doing that are representing me, people are starting to see the threat isn't there that they've been told should be there. They're ready for change enough that they're looking more deeply. And I think that's a great thing. Like I said, that's these difficult conversations, these wrestling with the issues. What are my personal level of priorities here? I want to be safe. I want to thrive economically. I want to be a mother to my own children and make decisions for my own children. At the end of the day, the average New Yorker is just a regular person. We're every day, especially upstate. We're very, we have a really traditional New Yorkness to us. And I think that that's where that representation needs to be a little more accurate in the assembly, especially.
Alicia Purdy, candidate for the 109th Assembly District. We thank you for your time this morning. Thanks for sitting down.